Okay, so for the final video, this will be the last one, I want to discuss the resources and kind of where, not really where I'm pulling this information from. This is a lot of it's my opinions of how things would be helpful. But I did find some websites that kind of agreed with them and had some good information, I thought, so I'll provide that as well. I'm going to link everything as well as put the book names that I'm going to use in the description. But to start, first of all, I want to talk about the biggest resource that would be most helpful is absolutely hands down going to be the ESL Professional. If that is able to happen, that's huge. That gets us access to WIDA scores, right? And the WIDA, standardized testing, which allows us to assess how proficient some students are and how unproficient some others are, what they need help with. And then we can kind of try to base how we're doing different lessons off of that. That would be huge. I think that would be absolutely informative. And then they would also they would be able to do different classes with the students. They would be able to do classes with your volunteers to help the volunteers learn how to interact and teach in this informal setting. It would be absolutely beneficial. The best resource a ministry like this could have is some kind of ESL professional where they can come every once in a while and instruct both. I think it'd be more than valuable to instruct volunteers / staff as well as instructing the students themselves again. So that would be the biggest resource. All right. Next, some other things I wanted to use is, so I haven't put them in a glossary yet, but they're going to go in this one. And so we're going to have a couple different tests. So the TOEIC, the TOEFL, and the IELTS. I think these would be huge. One, you're not going to have, the students aren't going to have to take these when they graduate because they're graduating from an American school. So in theory, they should be chill, right? But one of the cool things is, if students were coming from a foreign country to go to these different schools, to go to different universities, so this is more so for the graduating students that we would have in our program. But if they were coming from foreign countries to go straight into school, they would have to take these tests, right? To make sure that they can actually speak English, to make sure that they're proficient enough in the calc to go to school, to make sure that they're proficient enough in the BICS to do work. That's what these are, right? Is exams to see if they can go to school or go to work. The TOEIC is the one that they go to school. Or no, they go to work. My apologies. This is the one, the work-based one. And then TOEFL IELTS is for going into universities. One of them's for British or not. But, so they don't have to take these, but I think they would still be more than beneficial. There's some study materials that I found that I'll link in the description that they could be able to use to study for these tests. Not even to take them, but just because they can learn a lot of information about English from that. And so it would be more than helpful, right? And I also think it could be helpful in training volunteers, because if you have the volunteers kind of maybe take this exam or whatnot, take the TOEFL, take the IELTS, take the TOEIC, whatever it might be, they can kind of understand the process of, okay, well, this is how learners learn. This is what they need to learn. And that can also help them kind of create their own ideas that work with ours to help these students learn informally through our ministry. And then we're also going to have the different books that we used in class. And so I want to use the Donald Snow book. I think that's absolutely beneficial, not necessarily for how to teach, sort of. I think it's beneficial for why we should do it as Christians and how we should do it as Christians. I think that even though it's still kind of based in a formal setting, at least in my opinion, I still believe that there's more than useful to see, okay, here's how they're doing it in a formal setting. We can kind of script off of this and do our own thing with this. I also want to use the second language acquisition myths that we used in class as well. That was in this class. That's right. I keep getting my classes. I think that's just huge for debunking different thoughts that people might already have about second language learners or about whatever it might be in that way, because it definitely changed the way I think about things. And so I think these volunteers who aren't trained in this, if we tell them these different myths, then, oh wow, now all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, I thought that. Okay, well, now I realize it's not true. Here's how I can shift from that. Okay. And then I also want to use, I'll link 2 websites down there. I'll put a title, this is what those are for. But I want to, these 2 websites that I found, they're not really super information heavy, but I think they have a lot of good like basic general ways of how to interact with different students, or with students from different cultures, or students from that are still learning English and that aren't proficient enough to speak 100% completely. And it has different ways to act with that. And then, as well as the top one, has a book at the bottom of the website that it's, I forget what the title is, but it's at the bottom of the website, and it's something along the lines of like ESL, EFL, survival guide or something like that, which I think would also be a good book, just because if that website is using it to get the information that it has, I think it would also help you kind of dig deeper into, okay, well, here's how I interact with these. Here's how we interact with students that don't speak English and that kind of thing, you know. And then, let me flip my paper. And then I want to use a couple other books from both listening and speaking class last semester, as well as reading and writing this semester. These are going to be good for the in-depth. So this is going to teach you a lot about how students learn language, more than really how to. It's kind of based on a formal setting as well, but it really tells you a lot about how they learn language. And so if you want to go in depth in that, it's not necessarily necessary, but it is super beneficial to learn how students learn language in depth. These would be that. And then you can kind of help your volunteers learn, you can kind of teach your volunteers out of this as well. And then I also have 2 PDFs. The first one is a PDF about starting an ESL ministry. It seems to be based more on the formal aspect of ESL again, so in a classroom type vibe, but it's starting a ministry that's still based in ESL. And so I think that can be very helpful, just because we're going to see them use their faith in this ESL ministry. And so we can kind of see how to correlate that between the two, which is super useful. And the last one, I absolutely love this one, is what I'm calling like a Bible huddle time kind of. And so the last PDF is going to be a PDF that I found that has Bible teachings, and they're correlated, and not correlated, they're written to use towards students who don't speak English. And so it's like it's kind of like a lesson plan in an actual classroom, but with using the Bible as kind of the text. And so we can kind of base off of that for these little Bible huddle times that we do, because we're a ministry, we want to preach the gospel. And so we can use this PDF to help us kind of model these little Bible times that we want to do with our students, and kind of learn how to make it so that we can teach it to ESL students. And it's not just us preaching the Bible at them, it's us kind of trying to make it so that we can teach ESL students. If that makes sense. And then with that, that's the last one I have. Thanks for watching. I'm going to have the full glossary in this video. I think this project was a lot of fun. It was very stressful. I went through a bunch of different videos, but it was a lot of fun. And I think it'll help me learn a lot. And so I look forward to hopefully being able to actually incorporate this one day, because I want to work with those students. And so I hope one day I'll be able to come back to these videos and be like, Brian, you were a genius. Well, maybe not that far, but yeah. So thanks again for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I would be more than happy to answer. Goodbye.